Hello there, I hope you're having a wonderful day. I recently acquired a large lot of Franklin Library books. In fact, it was just today, around 57 of them, but I don't have all of them because I actually forgot to pick a few of them up. So 54 Franklin Library books plus a few extras, and I'm going to be cleaning them, and I will talk about them as I do so. They came quite dusty. I actually went and picked them up. They didn't come to me, and I got them out of the home of a very nice old man who was selling them, and they were very dusty, and they also had a few other very minor blemishes, but overall they were in very nice condition. But I have a few simple tools that I'm going to be using to clean each of them off, which should be quite nice to watch. I have this metal spatula, I believe it's called, and I'll be using it to remove bits of gunk that I noticed on a few books, not many though. This is a little microfiber brush for cleaning dust out of little cracks and crevices that this larger horsehair brush cannot reach. And this will be for dusting off the edges of the pages and the covers. And then in case there are any stray pencil marks inside the books, I have this handy little eraser here. So before we get to the Franklin Library books, I have these other ones I bought on Thrift Books, just two. And you also will notice that I turned off my noise suppression and noise gate on my microphone so that you can hear the sounds of the brushes and the other tools on the books, which should sound quite nice. So this first book here is Dante's Divine Comedy, and this is the modern Clive James translation, which is difficult to get anywhere else. So I got it on Thrift Books for about $8 or so, and this edition doesn't come in any nicer bindings, which is why I bought this one. Sorry, this translation, I should say. So there's this little label on the spine. I'll remove that. It shouldn't cause too many issues. Yep. Oh, it does bring a bit of the paper off. A little unfortunate. I'm not too sure if there's any way to remove that glue. Actually, that might have worked. So this book right here is the Clive James translation, as I already said. And this is a translation I've been interested in acquiring and reading to see if it's any good, because I heard it's quite controversial. Which one of those is it? Yes, controversial. No, controversial. Man, I get that word messed up all the time. Controversial. There we go. Some people say it's good, and other people say it's kind of wacky for a modern translation, a little silly sounding at times. And this is the translation used in the Deluxe Easton Press set. So I picked up this hardcover to see if it's any good before I go in and buy the super expensive deluxe edition from Easton Press themselves. I'm not too sure what that is. That's probably just a scratch. At least that spine is looking much better, and it's no longer sticky, so it looks like the eraser actually did work. I'll get the edges real quick. You may notice some dust coming off, although I do have the light on, so it might be a bit hard. I can already smell all the dust coming off of these books. The little decal they use is pretty interesting. There's a little something right there. Got that out as well. Little scuffs, stuff that always come out. That should be good enough for this book. It wasn't too bad. You'll notice that the later books have a lot of dust in them. And then there's one more little thing. The spine was separating, so I have a bit of acid-free PVA glue. Although I'm not sure, this might have hardened from not being used, so I might have to go break the seal. This is what it looks like. It's just basic craft glue, but it's acid-free, which is nice. I believe I'll have to stab it real quick. I will be right back. There we go. I've got the glue unplugged. So I just take a little bit and stick it underneath there. That should be good. It might not stay. This was a cheap hardcover, so it doesn't matter too much if it doesn't. Yeah, that'll be just fine. So the next book is actually a set of 3 that I bought, and I'll make a video on these as well. This is the Washington Square Press Divine Comedy by Louis Biancoli, illustrated by Harry Bennett, and it's a 3-volume, as you saw. So I'll take the books out, and we'll just focus on the slipcase first. So there are a few little marks. Yeah, none of that other stuff will come off. Oh, this smells luxurious. And we've got a little rip here, which is very unfortunate because it's a nice, dense slipcase. But it can be repaired pretty well with some of this glue, which is also acid-free. It has a very tight flow though, so it needs a lot of I need to unplug it again. Sorry about the commotion with the glue. It was being a little disobedient, not wanting to come out. There we go. And a little there we go. I have a little, well, quite a lot actually. That might be more than necessary. Slide that in there. My fingernails are also quite dirty because moving these boxes got a lot of dust and dirt in there. And once I move on to the books, I'll start talking more about them and the interesting man who owned them. He was quite a joy to talk to. Perfect. Once that dries, that should hold for until I'm dead, which is as long as it needs to. Now let's move on to these actual books. So I'll start with Hell. So they are quite nice looking little books. I'll check the insides for pencil marks. There we go. 3 volumes, $29.50. There we go. No more pencil mark. And this is quite a nice looking volume. It's got the Italian on the other side. And this smells beautiful. Absolutely amazing. So now let's dust it. Guess I'll go for the little cracks and crevices real quick. Not too much dust on these, of course, because they were in the slipcase. I'll give the covers a quick dust. Yeah, it was pretty clean already, but it's good to give it a quick one over. It's the next one. This one, unfortunately, has this library stamp in it. Oops, sorry about that. Actually, I'm going to move this up real quick. Perfect. That should be much better now because it is easy to stand up the books and get a good look of the edges while I clean them. Yep, that's permanent ink, unfortunately. It's not too big of a deal, it's just a little stamp. That pencil mark can still there. That's about as good as it'll get. Now to dust this. I do like the very nice sprayed edges on the top. There's a little star imprint back there, which is neat. And the last book, this one actually does need a little more work. Here it is. This one looks a little rougher. It's like a little bit of gunk down in. Doesn't look like that's going to come out. And this one actually has some. This is why I got the micro spatula, because there's this weird stuff on the corner, which I don't like at all. Oops. Oh, it's hard. I wonder if that's excess glue that was applied. That is really strange. Oh. Wow. I think that's glue, but it's very annoying. Oh, there we go. Little dried booger. You can see the pages are missing some of that stain underneath that, but it looks much better without that glue on there. Oh, and I'll get the pencil mark inside this one. There it is. Back to the little gunk on this one, and once I'm done with this, I can move on to the Franklin Library books, which is the main event. Sorry for boring you with these not Franklin Library books. Oh. I really need to get in super close. Holy crap. Might cut out this glue removing if it gets too Oh, there it is. Finally. It took a little thread of the headband with it, but I'll take that to get that ugly amber crust out of there. this one last bit right here. There we go. Much better. This library stamp says Barbara Hoffman in Scranton, PA. Interesting. 2009. Interesting to have a personal stamp, unless that's Barbara Hoffman Library or something like that. And what's interesting is that these books actually came from Georgia, not Pennsylvania. Well, there it is. Those red top edges actually match the slipcase. And then the weight, since the damage is on the bottom, the weight of the books being in here should flatten out that bottom edge quite nicely. Alright, moving on to the Franklin Library books. Here's the first one, not too interesting. Actually, since I just did 2 Divine Comedies, I might as well do a third. Here's the Franklin Library one. And as you can see, it is quite dusty on the top. So if I give it the old brush, oh yeah. Oh, that's a lot of cigarette dust. Perfect. This is a wonderful book. Oh yeah. It's printed well. Looks good. The entire inside is beautiful looking as well. And I like to put the ribbon markers personally in the front here. So I like to turn them like this. Oh, actually that one, no. You give them a nice 90-degree turn, and then you slide them in the front like that. And there it is. Beautiful. And that, there we go. But yeah, that's a very nice looking addition. Some of the pages aren't even separated. Beautiful. So, about these books, they're all Franklin Library books, and I was just last night, actually, I was on Facebook Marketplace, and I saw a listing for 59 leather Franklin Library books for only, this one is super dusty, as you can see. $59 was what the listing said, but it's really $57 because 2 of them were not Franklin Library books. I did not end up getting those 2. $59 for $250 total. And when I saw that, I thought it would have been gone already because it was such a good deal. So I messaged the person who had them listed, just because why not, even though I figured they would be gone. And I said, hello, are these still available? And if they are, I will come pick them up tomorrow. So I would have been the 1-day expedited pickup if they had them available. And they said there were 2 other people in front of me, and they'll get back to me if those 2 other people are not responding. And I figured it was gone by then, and I was like, alright, that's unfortunate. But just a few hours later, I got a message saying, hey, the other 2 people have not responded. Are you able to come pick these up tomorrow? And I said, absolutely. That little mark's not coming off. Oh well. Beautiful looking book. So I said, absolutely, I can come pick them up tomorrow. And the next day I woke up, and I was actually not home. I was 2 hours away from home on a vacation. And the person said that I would have to come pick them up. The woman said I would have to come pick up the books that day, or they would be going to someone else who could come get them, because it was urgent for a move. So as soon as I got home today, I drove in. I said, it was an hour and a half away. I drove in and I picked them up. And this morning, actually, the person listing them said that there were about 14 other people waiting after me to come pick them up. So if I was not able to come in today, I for sure would not have been able to get them. But I went in and after mistakenly by the owner getting sent to the wrong address. Ooh, this one has quite a bit of dust on the top there. After mistakenly getting sent to the wrong address, I made it to the house, and an old man greeted me, because the woman who listed the books was actually the niece of this old man who was helping him list some of his stuff so that he could move. It gets more interesting than that, though. So I walk into the house, and he was smoking in there, which gave me a bit of a lowered my hopes a little bit. I figured they might be kind of in a bad environment. But I went up to the room that they were in, and I saw them. They were all sitting very neatly, well placed on a shelf, which I figured would be good. And I said, and I asked if he smoked in the house. Of course he did, which made me worry that the books would be very tarnished. You know, they would smell like smoke. They might reek and look bad and be covered with cigarette dust. And sure enough, they were covered with dust, but they all actually look perfectly fine. They look like this, basically. No issues at all on any of them. And I was looking through them. I noticed a few very good titles, such as the Divine Comedy, which is alone worth about $100 if it's in good condition. And that one is, of course, in near perfect condition. Sorry, this dust is really getting to me. I'm probably getting secondhand smoke from the dust coming off the tops of these. So I was looking through them. They were all in perfect condition, basically. The only major issue was that they were all super dusty, but that's a temporary issue. Of course, the dust can be removed, and it hadn't actually affected any of the books. As you can see, they were all perfectly fine, basically. There's a little... yeah, that's not coming off, whatever that is. And a lot of them actually looked as they had been completely unread. So I have, of course, handed the old man the money, the $250, which was under $5 a book, which is a steal. Even for books that are not in the best condition, it's still a steal. And we started packing them up. This is the Tragedies of Sophocles. I actually have not been naming the books, so let me go through them real quick. Canterbury Tales is that big brown one. Molière Plays. And John Stuart Mill's Political Writings were the other ones I did. Of course, the Divine Comedy was the first one I did, the big red one. Ooh, there's a lot of dust accumulating on here. I feel like I'm about to sneeze. Next stack of books. Here we go. This is the Sigmund Freud Basic Works. Of course, none of them even had sunwear on the end papers. Well, most of them didn't. This one did, I guess, but most of them were fine. And the sunwear, honestly, oh my god, that one's dusty. The sun damage wasn't even much of an issue, to be honest with you. So there were many good titles I noticed as I was looking through them. The Divine Comedy is one. There is a War and Peace in here. There is a the Aeneid by Virgil. I forget which way is the correct way to pronounce it. There is, oh man, there's a lot of Greek stuff. There's like a Plutarch's Lives as well, which is neat. And then there's a lot of the political writing sort of thing. This Sigmund Freud book does kind of stand out as a bit different than those ones because it's a psychology book. Looks like it has a little bit of suntan on the spine, but still good quality. This one is The Flowers of Evil by Charles Baudelaire. And I love look at the dimensions of this book. It's super tall, but kind of narrow. Like you can put your hand around it, but it's a tall book. It's pretty interesting dimensions. It's poems though, so that makes sense. Now, anyways, the old man there, I thought he was just kind of someone who purchased these books back in the 80s or so as one of the people who wanted to buy fancy books, and then they ended up not being read because they are not read, although they appear to be not read. But what he said to me was that he actually has read all of them, and he was a huge reader himself, which I was quite pleasantly surprised when he said that. And for the next hour or so, while I was loading these, maybe only like 30 or 40 minutes actually, we talked about books. And he was very interesting to talk to. He had a lot of reading experience under his belt, and I definitely enjoyed all the things we talked about. So, for one, his favorite author is Charles Dickens, and there are a few Charles Dickens works in here. Maybe only like one or two. Here's Moll Flanders by Daniel Defoe. Ooh, this one has a little bit of standing on the front, but that's not the end of the world. And on the bottom, actually. Once again, not the end of the world. Maybe some paint or something. Not too sure. Very dusty top edge. So his favorite author is Charles Dickens, and his favorite book of all time is actually David Copperfield by Charles Dickens, and I believe that there is a copy of that in this lot. I'm not 100% sure. And his least favorite book is Ulysses by James Joyce, and there is a copy of that in the lot, I'm for certain, because it was one of the things that stood out to me as something I want to read. So his favorite book, David Copperfield, he says he's read it about 6 times. And his least favorite, James Joyce, which was the only book, he said, out of all of the books in his library room, of which there were a lot, because I only took the Franklin Library books, of course. Those what were listed. And by the way, that last one was Moll Flanders. Next is Euripides Plays, and this is some, wow, exquisite leather, beautiful looking book. So nice. Yeah. So where was I again? He said that Ulysses was actually the only book he's never been able to finish. He said the writing was super hard, the sentences sort of dragged on far too long for him, things of that nature. He just didn't like the writing style, basically. I thought that was interesting that out of all the books, Ulysses was the one he didn't like, especially considering he was able to, he really liked Charles Dickens' writing style, which is, very elegant Victorian writing. Beautiful book. Let me grab another stack. Here we go. Next one is Vanity Fair by William Makepeace Thackeray. I've heard of this, but I didn't know the author, to be quite honest with you. So, wow, that dust is thick on there. But as I was saying, sorry about that. I'm going to try this dust mitt. Oh my goodness. Whoa. I don't know if you can see that on the camera, but there is so much dust coming off of this book. It's insane. Sorry about that. So, I don't even know where I was. I got so distracted by the insane amount of dust on that book. But where was I? He likes Dickens, Victorian writing style. So he's read David Copperfield about 6 times. He said he's read like A Christmas Carol by Charles Dickens somewhere around 20 times. He reads it every year for Christmas, in fact, which I thought was amazing because it is an amazing story, and it was pretty heartwarming to know that he reads it every single Christmas. And you would think that if he is such an avid reader and he's read all these books and he likes basically all of them, why he wouldn't have kept them. And I was curious about that too. But it turns out that he is moving and he's actually gone legally blind. So he's unable to read books anymore, which I thought was quite sad for out of all people, someone who loves to read, being the one to go blind. Not fully blind, of course. He was looking at me and talking to me and things. He was just legally blind, so he wouldn't be able to read the words on a page. So he had to move out of his house into an apartment. It was a house in Pittsburgh, downtown Pittsburgh, kind of like a very, very packed suburb, basically. One of those very hilly suburbs in Pittsburgh. And he was moving from it to an apartment where he would have better accessibility. This is the Scarlet Letter, by the way. I don't like how it's bound in brown. I would think that the Scarlet Letter should always be a book that's bound in red to match. But I thought it was quite sad that he has to get rid of all these books that he treasures, because they are very nice and they're also nice for reading. But I asked him what he does to read then. Does he use audiobooks or something like that maybe, or does he just not read anymore? And what he said was actually pretty clever. He buys the large print books, and that one's got a big streak. I don't think that'll come off. Oh, it does come off. Very nice. Oh, I did distress the leather a little bit, but it's better than the mark being there, so oh well. Anyways, he buys these super large print books, but he still can't see those. So what he does actually is he has this special reader for people who are legally deaf. It's from like the non-profit whatever, or from his medical, whatever organization gives him the supports that he needs, I'm guessing, to get around and handle everyday life, basically, with his loss of vision. So this is Aristophanes' 5 Comedies. That's a nice one that I've never actually seen before. So anyways, and this one is Ralph Waldo Emerson's essays. Ooh, I'm actually interested in reading this one at some point. So he lives in a 2-story house, and he said that his family doesn't want him staying in there because he is by himself in that house. I don't know if his spouse maybe passed away or if he didn't have one. I never inquired him about that, but whatever the reason, he lives alone in that house. And I thought it was quite sad that he had to move, because he said it was his family house for so many years. I think 70 years, 75 maybe. So unfortunate to see that he has to move out of it, but his family was helping him, which I thought was nice. And I'm glad that he has people who are helping him manage as he ages. But anyways, they didn't want him in this 2-story house by himself, and they didn't want him driving either, because he didn't have anyone he was living with, and the area he lives in is kind of, if I'm being honest, it's a disaster to drive in, because it's one of those neighborhoods that boomed during the Industrial Revolution, but was built really before cars were a thing. Let me grab more books. This next one is Michael Montague's essay. I think that's how you say it. So it's one of those suburbs that boomed before cars became prolific. Oh, that one's got some bad smelling cigarette dust on it. I'm pretty sure that's what that is, at least. So the issue is that the roads, the streets, are not made for cars. They're made for people walking, but people, of course, have to put their car somewhere. So there's basically just cars all over the, like, halfway up onto the sidewalk, all over the road. It's a two-way street that becomes a one-way road, basically, whenever people are parking, which is all times of day. And it's also extremely hilly. There's a million turns you have to take to get anywhere in the neighborhood. It's just a absolute disaster of planning. But it had a nice feel, if I'm being honest. It had a nice little neighborly feel, if that makes sense. Like a "won't you be my neighbor" type thing. Mr. Rogers, very friendly feeling. All the people were outside in their yards and stuff like that. It was a very hot day today in Pittsburgh. So it was authentic, even though it was a disaster of planning. Leaves of Grass, I'm actually very glad I got this. I'll definitely be keeping this one. I do love Walt Whitman's poetry. In fact, if I find my favorite one real quick. Where is it at? Memories of President Lincoln, 314. And there it is. Oh, Captain, my Captain. So, anyways, he lives in this two-story house in this very perilous neighborhood that's not made for driving whatsoever. And he laughed about it a bit when I made a little comment that, it might be kind of, if you have issues driving, it might be not the best to have to drive in this neighborhood with the streets. I felt a little unsure about my own driving on these roads, and he laughed about it and said, "Yeah, it would be. You don't want if you." What were his exact words? "If you had me driving you around, it would be more thrilling than the Thunderbolt at Kennywood," is what he said. Oops. Which is a roller coaster at an amusement park in Pittsburgh. And I'm actually, because that stood out to me, because Kennywood is sort of an amusement park in Pittsburgh that used to be super popular, and it's sort of faded because of the management being poor and things like that, So, and the Thunderbolt is actually one of the oldest rides there, and I just thought it was, unique that he pointed out the Thunderbolt specifically over the other more thrilling roller coasters that now exist there. I just thought it was like a bit of a cool, how his way of thinking about, like, the Thunderbolt was probably what he grew up with. He grew up in Pittsburgh, and the Thunderbolt is, for most people who have been to large amusement parks like Cedar Point, once you go on this Thunderbolt ride, it's a wooden ride that's super old. It's not the most exhilarating, really, but I imagine that if he went there a lot when he was a kid, that was one of the biggest rides in the country at the time. So his comparison was basically using it as the saying that his driving would be comparable to the most thrilling ride in the entire country, roller coaster ride. And I just thought that was neat whenever I really thought about it, because he didn't mention the Steel Curtain or the Phantom's Revenge, which are relatively newer coasters there. So I just thought that was a neat little artifact from our conversation. What is this one? This is Charles Darwin's The Origin of Species. The leather on this feels very weird. I think it's still real, but it just doesn't look like bonded leather. It looks fake, right? But it might be real, but it could potentially be fake. But then again, I don't think they ever made... If I look at the publishing information, 1975. It doesn't say about it being bound in leather. What was this published for? It just says a limited edition, 1975. Huh. So, anyways, continuing on in our conversation. So he is a reader, avid reader. He buys these large print books, or he gets them from the library, and he has this special magnifying glass thing with a super powerful light, so it's already large print, but then it enhances the words by a lot, and he basically slides it over the text, and it super magnifies the text, basically. And I thought that was neat, because I asked him about audiobooks. Personally, I'm not a fan, and he said he's also not a fan of audiobooks. And that was a neat similarity that we had. He likes, he prefers to read and process the words himself and go at his own pace rather than have someone read them for him. Charles Darwin. And then after that, what he said was he said he didn't know if I did it when I read, but he said that when he reads, he visualizes, he creates the scene in his head that he's reading out. This is the Decameron, by the way. I think it's a collection of French stories by Giovanni, maybe Italian, Giovanni Boccaccio. I think so. And I said, hey, that's what I do too. And he also said he doesn't like audiobooks because the narrator imitates the characters' voices, if that makes sense. Or sometimes the narrator, or sometimes they hire voice actors. And he said that he prefers to imagine the voices in his own head, and I was like, wow, that's exactly what I do, actually. I try to think of what they would have talked like, how they're talking. Are they, using colloquialisms and stuff, or are they talking formally? And then I try to imagine their accents. So we talk about Charles Dickens, of course, his favorite author. And I'm currently reading A Tale of Two Cities. So I said, I try to imagine them in my head, imagine how they would be speaking with the British accents. And that's what he does as well, which I imagine it's what lots of people do. But I thought it was neat how we shared that as a similarity that made us not like audiobooks. It's like a principle of why neither of us like audiobooks, because we prefer to sort of create the world for ourselves rather than have the the narrator of an audiobook create us the world. The Red and the Black by Stendhal. Oh my god, that's bad. the cigarette dust, I'm probably going to have black lung by the time I'm done with these. The cigarette dust is a little crazy. So I believe that he smoked in his room, in his house, or so I don't believe, I know, because he was doing it when I got there, and I'm guessing that he didn't go up and just smoke in that library room in the upper floor, so that might have protected his sort of protected the books a little bit. And I don't know if the dust was just because it's a dusty house and they were untouched for years. Maybe he went legally blind years ago and they haven't gotten around to selling the books until now, which I imagine is how it is. He probably did lose his vision quite a long time ago, not just last week or something, and then they threw up the books. Here are some more. And here are some more that I'll set on the floor in front of me, I guess. There we go. Alright. Women in Love by D.H. Lawrence. Anyways, this one's got quite a bit of sunwear, as you can see. I think that this particular volume is prone to sunwear. I'm not sure if it's the color of the leather or something, but... So, anyways, oops. I don't know if that was me or not. That's bad. So I imagine that as he smoked over many, many years, like it could have been literal decades, like 30, 40 years maybe of smoking with these books in that room. And maybe it's cigarette dust that settled on top of these, but either way, the cigarette smoke a little infused in the books, but honestly, they smell quite nice inside. I think that is the cigarette smoke smell, and I hate it just as much as anybody else. My parents have never smoked I've never been in a smoker house before, like lived in one, and when I do go in them, they smell terrible, in my opinion. They're pretty bad. It clings to your clothes and stuff, but for some reason, books, I don't know what it is about them, but books with smoker smell, cigarette smoke smell all over them, clung to the pages and stuff. I don't know why, but it makes them smell good. It's like the one thing that cigarette smoke enhances. And I hate to say it, but it's true, in my opinion. Like, if I open this and wow, it's got this really unique smell to it. It's like it's been smoked, but not with tobacco smoke. Almost like smoked in a wood smoker or something. Oh yeah, I just forgot. This was Women in Love by D.H. Lawrence. And this current one is Gargantua and Pantagruel by Rabelais. I've seen this one quite a few times. Honestly, I have no clue what this book is about in particular. So, it might be interesting, but it is quite a long book. So, anyways, yeah, I like the cigarette smoke smell, and I don't know why. Don't hate me for it. It's just how it is. I don't know. There's something about it. It's great in books. And there's probably a point where it can be too extreme. Like if you have a family of chain smokers smoking in their living room every day, and the books are down in that living room, and just every day for 40 years they're soaking up cigarette smoke, they probably will be unbearable to actually try to read. here's the 12 Lives of Plutarch, Franklin Library. This is an interesting one. And honestly, I don't know the value of most of these because I've seen, whenever I buy Franklin Library books, I only buy them in lots, unlike Easton Press, where I occasionally buy them individually, but still mostly in lots. But I still know the individual prices of many Easton Press books because they're more common. But a lot of these Franklin Libraries, I don't know the individual prices. So we'll have to find out. Plutarch's 12 Lives. There's some little dimples on the spine there. Just a little interesting. But yeah. Smoker smoke. Whoa. Check out the gilt pattern. Do you see how this and this corner and this corner have different foiling? So when I turn it, these two corners get dark and these two are light. And then I turn it some more. And then look, now these two are light and these two are dark. That is some awesome foiling. Wow, that's wonderful. Is this a different series than the 12 or the 100 greatest books? 1981? The Dryden translation, for anyone who cares. I'll have to read that at some point. And speaking of that, actually, and I have this is Henry James Tales. I have this exact edition over on my shelf already. But speaking of Plutarch's Lives, so we were talking about books, of course, the whole time, basically. And he's a big history guy. He likes the classics, and he likes history, particularly World War II, the Napoleonic Wars, and things like that, and the French and Indian War, and that stuff like that. And he said like World War II, and like, the coming of the Nazi Party to power in Europe, and them taking stuff over. And he likes like Napoleonic Wars too, like how did Napoleon take stuff over? He said stuff like he's interested in like the wars, and specifically like the big empires. How did they get so big and conquer so much? Things like that. So he recommended Plutarch's Lives. He said he likes reading history books like that, and Plutarch's Lives was one of the history books he recommended the most. I did notice he had a lot of World War II books, like he had Winston and Churchill, and a lot of stuff related to those two guys in separate books. But the book, specifically the title called Winston and Churchill, was a famous, I've seen it a lot before, so I'm guessing it's a popular book in some regard. And by the way, I've been fixing the bookmarks on all of these, taking them out from in between the pages, because if you pull them while they're in that position, it can damage the pages. It'll basically, imagine you're taking a piece of rope and you're, here. I forgot to do it on this one. So you see we have this wrapped around the pages. A lot of what people do is pull this from one side to bring it around the other. But what happens is if I pull this down, it's a lot of friction. It's gonna slide over this page edge, and it's gonna cause a lot of friction, and it's usually going to dent this page right here as it slides over it like that. It causes a dent. It can wear off the gilt. It looks pretty ugly once you do that, and it can damage the pages worse than that, Oops, accidentally tapped the mic. Sorry about that. So, anyways, there we go. So I like to put them in the front cover because this silk moire cardstock, if it runs over the edge of this from someone pulling it, this piece of paper is reinforced. This is a much thicker piece of paper, so it's not going to get damaged. And this is the easiest way to make the bookmark accessible, just by putting it straight in the front cover like that. and I always turn them at a 90-degree angle like that, 40, or yeah. So I form a little right triangle, as you can see, by folding it underneath itself, kind of. And that is a way to not get it mangled while it's sitting atop the pages. It only creates a single fold in it, which is pretty nice. Next is Faust by Goethe. Is it Hans? I mean, I know he's German. Why do I think... No. Johann Wolfgang von Goethe. I don't know why I thought his name was Hans. Maybe that was the most generic German name I could think of. I mean, I knew this. I've seen the name before in other copies of Faust. For some reason, I forgot it, and it got replaced by Hans in my memory. Wow, look at those lovely maroon end papers. This is a nice little playbook, though. Anyways, that was what I was talking about, the best way to store the books, and the best way to store the ribbons. Back to the old man I bought these from, though, because I feel like, for the two people who see this, his story is worth talking about. Well, not really his story, but his interests. He's an interesting person. But yeah, moving on, we have John Donne's poems. I've never heard of John Donne, actually, so that's interesting. I found something new, which I'm surprised. Continuing on about the man, and by the way, his name is Jerry. I don't know if I'm guessing it's with a J, but of course there's the possibility it's with a G, Gerry. I think I've seen Jerry spelled like that, but I'm assuming it's Jerry with a J. So Jerry, nice old man. The lady who had the books listed was actually his niece. When I got to his house, she said that, I went to the wrong address at first, and she said, oh, sorry, it's my great uncle's house, so I accidentally gave you the wrong street address. It was just a few blocks down, basically, though, a few extra minute drive, so it was no big deal at all. And I got there, and it was very hot out. His house was not air conditioned at all, and it was quite hot inside. I was actually sweating by the end there, and he looked completely fine. He must be very tempered to the hot weather from being in that unair conditioned house. I don't even think I think there was a fan running in the living room, but of course circulating hot air around inside the building with the door closed isn't going to do much, obviously. But he was clearly just fine in it. He was also bald, so maybe that was why my head was very sweaty and his was not. This book is not in the best condition. Bernard Shaw's Plays. The spine is a bit, I don't know if you can see, the spine is a bit warped up here. It's a good angle. And the very tanned. Other than that, it doesn't look too bad, I suppose. Yeah. So, more about Jerry. He, let me think. Aside from his reading, he does enjoy learning about history. He's actually, when I was in his library, I saw a large collection of, not a large collection, I saw a set of the Harry Potter books in paperback, and I thought, oh, well, he's a classics and history guy. Those are probably, his relatives or something like that, one of his little nieces or something, and he just has them in here. Or maybe he just got them somewhere because Harry Potter books are everywhere, something like that. And I ignored him, that's what I assumed. But as we were talking about books, he said, what else I'm a huge fan of, actually? Not as big as a fan as the classics and stuff, but he said he is a huge Potterhead, and I've never heard that word before. I didn't know that there's a name for people who are big fans of Harry Potter. But I thought that was interesting that an old, maybe, 70, I would say, he was probably close to 70, man would be, can still find, like, young adult books just as enjoyable as other people find them. Because, Harry Potter was geared towards the, I would say, 13 to 18, like teenagers was the main target audience. But he still clearly thought it was very good. He said he was a big fan of Harry Potter. He said there's just nothing like it. And I guess he's true. There are no fiction series that are sort of about, like, wizards and stuff like that, especially like the, what's it called, urban fantasy, where it's kind of mixed in with the real world. Like, it just takes place in plain old Britain, London. So I guess that's neat that, you wouldn't expect this 70-year-old man who loves classics and history and, World War II and Charles Dickens to also be such a big fan of Harry Potter. I just thought it was very neat. This is Tom Jones by Henry Fielding. I believe I have this on the shelf in the Easton Press format, actually, which is neat. This one looks like it has a bit of waviness. I don't know if the paper is just super thin, because this is a big book. It's 700 pages. The paper is quite thin, but it looks like it might have got moist at some point. So I think it's had water damage. Not 100% certain. But yeah, I thought it was interesting that he also found Harry Potter as enjoyable as, his the classics that he loved so much and things like that. He said he also was a fan of movies, particular old movies though, not new modern films or anything like that. He recommended me David Copperfield, his favorite book, but the movie from 1930s, 40s, or 50s, I can't remember. He mentioned the actors. He said it, and he read the book 6 times. And if he is such a prolific reader as he is, then I trust his word. But he said that the David Copperfield movie is actually super true to the book, and it was very incredibly well made. He said he liked them both a lot. So that was another interesting thing I learned about him. And I'll grab a few more books. I'm about halfway through the lot, but only a few more before I will have to cut it here and then make a second part. But here are the last 2, so I can finish my thought. But I just thought that was super neat about him. And another thing I noticed, as I walked by his upstairs bedroom, the door was open. It was very austere inside. It was definitely very, like, is timely the right word? It was just very, I don't want to say vintage. It looked, I guess vintage may be the right word. But on the wall there was a painting of someone. By the way, this is the political writings of Jean-Jacques Rousseau. There was a painting of someone as I walked by, and I just saw it out of the corner of my eye. All I could tell was that it was a painting of someone, and he was walking behind me, and I stopped and I stepped back for a second and I glanced in at the painting, and I saw that it was Abraham Lincoln, which I thought was interesting to have a painting of Abraham Lincoln in your bedroom. So I was curious about it, and he obviously saw that. He said, "What were you looking at?" And I said, I saw you at a painting in your bedroom, and I took a step back. I saw it was Abraham Lincoln. I was checking out who that painting was of, and he said, "Oh yeah, that's he's one of the I can't remember his exact words, but basically it's one of the people that he admires a lot, and I thought that was neat as well, that he, he's a history guy. He has like admirable, a lot of people like Abraham Lincoln, of course, as a president. Most Americans know who he is and go, yeah, that guy's a good president, but he actually learned a lot about Abraham Lincoln himself, I do believe. And that was one of the figures that he admired. He said he also, I thought it was interesting the way he framed it. He said, many people would think it's silly. This is William Faulkner's The Sound and the Fury. I'm glad I got this book as well. He said that most people think it's silly, but he also admires Richard Nixon, the president, 37th president, I think Richard Nixon was, that president during the first man on the moon and all that stuff, the Watergate scandal. He was the first sitting president to visit China. He reopened some trade relations with China, and he did other things, but of course very marred by the Watergate scandal, his reputation was. But I thought that oh my goodness, I can't believe I just messed up his name. Jerry, I don't know why I call him Bill. Jerry said, many people think that was silly, that he admires Richard Nixon because, of course, the scandalous stuff. And he says that he liked the things that he did, despite the bad things that he did, the terrible mistakes that he made. I thought that was an interesting perspective, that he was very moderate about the political figure historical figure, I guess you would say more now, that he admired. He had a very, very moderate temper, very moderate, seems to be a very rational, moderate outlook on things. He was just very interesting all around. I really enjoyed talking to him, and I'm very thankful that he sold me these books, allowed me to take care of them and stuff, of course. So that is the first half of these books. I think I did 28 of them. 28, and there are 59 of them. So I still have to do, 20. I can't do math. 29 more? No. 30 plus 28, 31 more. Yeah, 31 more. No, sorry, there's really only 57 in the lot, so 29 more. But 3 of them aren't here because I left them there. So the niece, they actually offered to ship them to me, which was very nice, kind of her. So I will be getting those on a later date, but of course it's only 3 books, so I'll be cleaning those separately. So the next part, I will be cleaning the remaining, oh boy, have to do more math. What was it? 59, but there's actually 57, but only 54 here, and I did 28 of them, so 26 more to do in the next part. And in the next part, I will be talking more about the books themselves, of course, and what I'll be doing with them, and of course that I'll be selling some. So if you're interested in any of them, they all go up on my eBay page, but you'll be able to buy them separately for cheaper if you wish, because I will be able to avoid the eBay fees and stuff like that, so it gives you a discount as well. But I'll talk more about that in the next part. So I think Jerry was a very interesting guy, very nice. I'm actually, honestly, more glad that I got to meet him there than just going there and picking up the books in 10 minutes. It was a very enjoyable conversation with him, and thanks to him for selling me this wonderful set of books, beautiful books. Thank you very much.